My 5 sisters stood behind Adrian while he accused me of stealing $12 million from our family foundation. In my first life, I had begged them to check the transfer logs until my voice broke. This time, I opened my phone, revoked Sterling Holdings' access to the fraud detection system I owned, and told my lawyer to preserve every server before anyone could erase the truth. Victoria stared at the notification on her tablet. What did you just do? I ended a software license. You cannot shut down a Sterling system because you are angry. It is not a Sterling system, I said. Northstar belongs to Greyline Systems. Your company has been using it under a temporary license for 3 years. Adrian gave a quiet laugh. He sat between my sisters at the long boardroom table, wearing the same dark blue suit he had worn on the day I died. You expect us to believe you built the system that protects a multi-billion-dollar company? No, I said. I am finished asking any of you to believe me. The laughter disappeared from his face. Around us, 23 directors, 6 foundation trustees, 2 outside auditors, and more than a dozen major donors watched in silence. On the screen behind Adrian was a bank record showing $12 million transferred from the Sterling Foundation to Reed Analytics. The document looked convincing. It had looked convincing in my first life too. Back then, I had surrendered my laptop, my administrator keys, and every private server because Natalie promised an honest investigation. By the next morning, the original logs had disappeared. 3 days later, Serena called me a fraud on national television. 1 month later, my sisters forced me to sign away my inheritance. 6 months after that, Adrian sent me a message claiming he had proof of who I really was. I drove to meet him. My brakes failed on the river bridge. The last thing I remembered from that life was the black water rising across my windshield while my phone displayed 5 unanswered calls to my sisters. Then I had opened my eyes in this boardroom. The same accusation, the same people, the same opportunity to destroy myself by begging for love from people who had already chosen someone else. Natalie pushed a document toward me. Sign the acknowledgement, Lucas. It does not admit criminal liability. It only confirms that you will surrender your devices and cooperate. I looked at the final page. Buried beneath the acknowledgement was a clause waiving my rights under the Sterling Identity Trust. In my first life, I had signed it without reading. I placed the document back in front of her. No, Amelia's expression hardened. If you are innocent, why refuse an investigation? I am not refusing an investigation. I am refusing to let the people accusing me control the evidence. Serena leaned toward the microphone. You are humiliating this family in front of our donors. I looked at Adrian. He was still smiling, but one of his hands had closed around his phone. No, I said. He is. I forwarded 3 files to Daniel Ruiz: the original software license, the immutable server archive, the emergency evidence preservation request. A moment later, every director received the same automated notice: Northstar license termination effective at midnight. Victoria rose from her chair. You will reverse this now. I spent 6 years trying to earn a place in this family, I said. Tonight, you made your decision. I removed the Sterling signet ring grandfather had given me and placed it on top of the false bank record. I am making mine. Then I walked out before any of my 5 sisters could order me to stay. By midnight, they would lose the system they thought they owned. By morning, they would discover that the brother they had thrown away was the only person who had been keeping their secrets from becoming crimes. The doors closed behind me, cutting off Victoria's demand that security stop me. No one followed immediately. They were too shocked. For 6 years, I had always been the one who stayed. I stayed when Serena seated Adrian beside her at family dinners and told me the chair at the end of the table was more appropriate. I stayed when Amelia refused to list me as grandfather's family contact because my identity was still disputed. I stayed when Natalie drafted 3 separate agreements limiting my access to the Sterling estate. I stayed when Grace apologized in private, then voted with the others in public. Most of all, I stayed every time Victoria told me that trust had to be earned. I had spent 6 years earning something they had given Adrian without question. That was the mistake that killed me. Mr. Reed. Daniel Ruiz waited near the elevators with a leather case under one arm. He was in his early 40s, calm enough to make angry people nervous. In my first life, I had contacted him 2 weeks before I died. This time, I had called him 40 minutes before the board meeting. Did they sign the preservation notice? I asked. They received it. Whether they respect it is another question. They will not. then the independent archive matters. The elevator arrived as we stepped inside. I checked the date again, October 14th, 183 days before the river bridge. My hands were steady, but I could still remember cold water filling my lungs. Daniel watched me close the calendar. You look like you have seen this meeting before. I have seen what happens when I trust them to investigate themselves. That was the only explanation I could give. I could not tell him that I had died. I could not tell him that I knew Adrian would spend the next 6 months transferring assets, drugging grandfather into silence, forging Natalie's signature, and preparing to sell Sterling Holdings to Blackridge Capital. I only knew that, this time, the evidence would survive. My phone rang before we reached the lobby. Victoria. I rejected the call. She called again, then Natalie, then Grace. I turned the phone to silent. Daniel glanced at the screen. You are not going to answer. They already heard me. The lobby of Sterling Tower had been decorated for the foundation gala. White orchids covered the central staircase. Donors in evening clothes were arriving through the revolving doors, unaware that the family hosting them had just accused its biological heir of stealing their money. Serena's communications team was already moving. 2 assistants stood beside the entrance, whispering into headsets. A photographer lowered his camera when he saw me. In my first life, Serena had ordered security to escort me through the front lobby so the donors would see me being removed. This time, I walked past them voluntarily. Lucas. Grace reached the lobby just before I reached the doors. She had removed her jacket, and her dark hair had fallen loose around her shoulders. Of my 5 sisters, she was the only one who had ever looked uncomfortable while hurting me. That had once made me believe she might eventually choose me. It only made her betrayal last longer. What? I asked. You cannot terminate Northstar tonight. Victoria says the quarterly compliance review is running. The license permits immediate termination if Sterling uses the platform to support fraud, conceal fraud, or seize Greyline property. You are accusing us of fraud now. I am protecting evidence. Adrian found the transfers. Adrian created the report. Her expression changed. You do not know that. I know the transfers did not go to Read Analytics. The account number matches. The last 4 digits match. The routing number does not. Grace stared at me. She managed Sterling Ventures. She understood banking records. For the first time that evening, doubt moved across her face. It disappeared almost immediately. Then explain that to the auditors. I tried that in the meeting. You cancelled a critical system and walked out. Because 5 people I once called my sisters had already decided that the man presenting the accusation was more trustworthy than the man asking them to verify it. Her eyes dropped to my empty hand. You left grandfather's ring. It belongs to the family you chose. That is not fair. I almost laughed. Fair. In my first life, Grace had visited me after I was expelled from the estate. She had brought groceries and told me she did not believe I was evil. Then she testified that I was unstable when Natalie sought an order to seize my servers. She always offered kindness after giving Adrian what he wanted. I am not asking you to agree with me, I said. Not anymore. Where will you go? Home. This is your home. No. This is where I kept waiting to be wanted. I stepped through the revolving door. Grace did not follow outside. Manhattan traffic moved beneath the lights. Daniel's car waited at the curb. Before I got in, my phone displayed a message from Adrian. You are making this worse for yourself. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Daniel. Then another message appeared. Once grandfather signs the proxy, you will have nothing left. I saved that too. Daniel read the copies on his tablet. He should not be discussing the proxy while the trust is under dispute. He thinks the dispute ends when I surrender, and you are not surrendering. I am withdrawing. There was a difference. Surrender meant letting them take what belonged to me. Withdrawal meant I decided what they could no longer use. We drove to Greyline Systems, for blocks south of Union Square. The office occupied 2 floors of a converted printing building. Sterling Holdings believed Greyline was a small contractor with 12 employees. It actually employed 63 security engineers, analysts, and forensic specialists across 4 states. I had hidden its growth because every time my family learned I possessed something valuable, Adrian found a reason the family needed it. Northstar had begun as a tool for my foster mother's machine shop. She had nearly lost the business after a bookkeeper stole from her. I built a basic monitoring program to identify duplicated invoices and altered account numbers. Years later, that program became one of the most accurate internal fraud platforms in the private market. Sterling Holdings had used it for 3 years. They had never paid the commercial rate, had allowed the discount because I thought saving their company would make them see me as family. It only taught them that my work was theirs. Mara Chen was waiting in the conference room when Daniel and I arrived. She had already connected the mirrored archive to an isolated network. Your transfer alert was correct, she said. The 12 million did not go to Reed Analytics, Halcyon Consulting. 3 payments went to Halcyon, 2 went through Branton Advisory, then converged in the same account, controlled by Martin Hale. She looked up. How did you know? Invoices from an earlier review. That was partly true. In my first life, I had discovered Martin's name 3 hours before my brakes failed. Mara turned the monitor toward me. The authorization trail is strange. The first approval came from Grace Sterling's hardware token, the second used a Foundation Administrator account assigned to Adrian. The final reconciliation report was generated manually. By whom? The user ID belongs to Lucas Reed. Daniel folded his arms. They used his name. Mara shook her head. Not exactly. The account was created 6 weeks ago. It looks like his account, but the employee number has an extra 0, a counterfeit identity hidden inside a counterfeit heirs system. Adrian had always liked symmetry. Can we prove where it was created? I asked. Not yet. Northstar recorded the device fingerprint, but the IP data is in Sterling's live environment. At midnight, the license switches to preservation mode. Mara nodded. Once that happens, Northstar will stop processing new Sterling transactions, but it will retain the last 90 days of authentication data. Daniel looked at me. They will accuse you of locking them out. They still have their own accounting software. Northstar only detects what that software misses, and if what it detects is embarrassing, they should have thought of that before they accused the owner of the system. At 11:43, Victoria called again. This time, she left a voicemail. Lucas, this performance ends now. Reinstate the license, return to the boardroom, and sign the cooperation agreement. If you force me to choose between you and the stability of this family, you will not like my decision. I listened twice, not because the words hurt, because I wanted to remember exactly how easily she made the choice sound. I forwarded the recording to Daniel. At 11:58, the Northstar control panel displayed every active Sterling connection: Sterling Holdings, Sterling Foundation, Sterling Health Network, Sterling Media Group, Sterling Ventures. 5 divisions, 5 sisters. Each had built part of her career on a system created by the brother she refused to recognize. At midnight, I pressed confirm. The green connection icons turned amber. License terminated. Preservation mode active. 30 seconds later, the alerts began. An unauthorized transfer from the Foundation. A concealed loan attached to Sterling Health. Bot network payments routed through Sterling Media. A draft change to the family trust. A pending data export from the executive office assigned to Adrian Sterling. Mara stared at the screen. He is moving tonight. He moved tonight in my first life too, I said quietly. Daniel looked at me, but I did not explain. I selected preserve all. Across the city, Adrian was probably still telling my sisters that I had destroyed myself. He did not understand that I had finally stopped trying to convince them. I was letting the evidence do it instead. By 7 the next morning, Sterling Holdings had sent 26 emails demanding restoration of Northstar. Victoria sent 12 of them. Natalie sent 6 legal notices. Serena's office requested a statement. Amelia wanted temporary access for the hospital network. Grace wrote only once, please call me before this becomes permanent. I did not answer any of them. Instead, I joined a video conference with First Atlantic Bank. 3 years earlier, Sterling Health had begun building a rehabilitation center in Queens. The project exceeded its budget after a contractor dispute. Victoria asked me to introduce her to investors. I did more than that. Greyline Systems had guaranteed $28 million of a $40 million bridge facility. The guarantee was temporary and could be withdrawn if Sterling made a material misrepresentation involving Greyline. The accusation at the board meeting qualified. The bank representative looked uncomfortable as Daniel presented the termination notice. Mr. Reed, withdrawing the guarantee does not immediately cancel the loan, she said. Sterling will have 30 days to replace the credit support. That is understood. Sterling Health may argue that this is retaliatory. It is risk management, Daniel replied. Their foundation accused the guarantor of financial fraud while relying on his assets. The representative nodded. We will notify them this afternoon. In my first life, I never withdrew the guarantee even after Amelia removed me from grandfather's medical contact list. I kept supporting her project because I thought patients should not suffer for our family conflict. Adrian used that hesitation against me. He transferred part of the loan through construction invoices and later blamed the shortfall on my company. This time, the hospital would have time to replace the guarantee, the project would not collapse, but I would no longer stand behind people who called me a criminal. At 10, I returned to the Sterling estate, not because Victoria ordered me to, because the clothes, documents, and equipment in my room still belonged to me. Daniel accompanied me, along with a neutral inventory officer. The security guards at the gate had received instructions not to admit me. Daniel handed them the access agreement grandfather had signed when I moved in. You can call Ms. Sterling, he said, or you can explain why you unlawfully withheld Mr. Reed's property after receiving a preservation notice. The gates opened. The Sterling estate stood on 6 acres overlooking the Hudson, gray stone walls, tall windows, perfect lawns. For 6 years, I had lived in the East Guest Wing. Adrian occupied the family suite that had once been prepared for the missing Sterling son. My bedroom contained almost nothing personal: a drafting desk, 2 computers, a bookshelf, a framed photograph of my foster parents beside their machine shop. The only Sterling object in the room was a wooden box containing letters from my mother. Grandfather had given it to me after the first DNA test. I placed it in my case. The inventory officer photographed every device before my staff disconnected it. I was securing the final server when Adrian appeared in the doorway. He wore a cream sweater and held a cup of coffee. Performing the role of relaxed air: you brought a lawyer to pack your clothes. I brought a witness. You always make everything ugly. I did not call a board meeting and accuse you of stealing $12 million. No, you only shut down the system the company needs to operate. The company operated before North Star, not at its current scale. That was the closest he had ever come to acknowledging what I had built. He stepped into the room and lowered his voice. You can still fix this, by confessing, by accepting reality. What reality is that? I am their brother. The words once would have cut through me, now they only exposed him. If that were true, I said, you would not need me to disappear. His jaw tightened. You came here 6 years ago with a test from a private laboratory and expected 5 women who had raised me to throw me away. I expected them to check the evidence. They did. They checked the test you arranged through a hospital where Martin Hale controlled security. His expression changed for less than a second. It was enough. I had not possessed proof of Martin's involvement in this timeline yet, but Adrian's reaction confirmed that the past had not changed. He recovered quickly. You sound paranoid. You sound nervous. He looked at the server case. What is on that? My property. Sterling data belongs to Sterling, which is why the data remains on Sterling servers. This contains Greyline code and independently preserved authentication records. You cannot use those records. I do not need to use them. I need to make sure you cannot delete them. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Victoria entered first, followed by Natalie and Grace. Victoria looked at the open cases. Put everything down. No, this equipment may contain evidence of embezzlement. Daniel stepped forward. The devices belong to Greyline Systems. We offered a certified forensic image through an independent examiner. Natalie held up a document. This is a litigation hold. A hold prevents destruction, Daniel said. It does not transfer ownership. Victoria ignored him and looked at me. You created this crisis. Restore the software and remain here until the audit is complete. Who chose the auditor? The Foundation Committee, chaired by Adrian. He discovered the transfers. He generated the report that concealed them. Grace's attention moved between us. Lucas said the routing number on the presentation did not match Reed. Analytics. Victoria turned toward her. We reviewed that. No, Grace said. We reviewed the final 4 digits. Adrian sighed. He told you exactly what to look for. Grace, of course you found an inconsistency. He built the fake document. That is not how routing numbers work, she said. Victoria's face hardened. This is not the time to fracture. There it was. Evidence was a fracture. Obedience was unity. I closed the final case. At 3 this afternoon, First Atlantic will notify Sterling Health that Greyline has withdrawn its guarantee. Amelia entered the doorway just in time to hear me. You did what? I ended the guarantee. That facility serves patients. The project has 30 days to replace my support. You have assets. Use them. You promised that funding. I promised it while you treated me as a member of this family. Her face flushed. So this is punishment? No. Punishment would be waiting until the loan defaulted. I gave the bank full notice. You are using sick people to force us to believe you. I am refusing to risk my company for people who accused me of theft. Adrian moved beside Amelia. He wants us frightened, that is all this is. I looked at the 5 women in the hall. Victoria, who demanded control. Amelia, who made cruelty sound compassionate. Natalie, who hid behind documents. Serena, absent because she was probably preparing the public story. Grace, still watching Adrian too carefully. In my first life, I had stood in that hallway and begged them to give me 48 hours. This time, I lifted the last equipment case. I am done frightening you, I said. From now on, you will only experience the consequences of your own decisions. I walked downstairs. No one tried to stop me again. At the front entrance, the inventory officer handed me the signed list. I returned the estate key to Victoria. Adrian leaned against the stair rail. Where will you go when Greyline fails? I looked back at him. You still think Greyline exists because of Sterling? It does. No, Sterling is the client I was too emotionally compromised to fire. His smile vanished. I left the estate at 12:27. At 12:41, Northstar sent an automated alert to the Independent Archive. Someone inside Sterling had attempted to delete the authentication history for Grace's hardware token. The deletion request came from Adrian's executive device. I forwarded the alert to Grace. No message, no accusation, only the record. At 1:13, she replied, I never authorized that transfer. For the first time in 6 years, one of my sisters had made a statement that did not begin with Adrian's version of events. Grace did not call me, she called Adrian. I knew because Northstar recorded a new login from her office at 1:27, followed by an authentication request from his penthouse. The system did not capture their conversation. It did not need to. At 1:34, someone attempted to revoke Grace's token. At 1:36, someone tried to create a replacement token using Adrian's administrator privileges. At 1:38, Grace's account was locked. Every action entered the Independent Archive. Mara watched the sequence on the conference room screen. He is cleaning the trail. He thinks the license termination cut off our visibility. It should have. Northstar's preservation clause keeps authentication records active for 72 hours after termination. She looked at me. You wrote a very aggressive contract. I wrote it after a client tried to destroy fraud evidence. That client had been Sterling Holdings. In my first life, had rewritten the contract 3 weeks before I died. The new version existed when I woke in the past because I had already updated Greyline's standard license months earlier. Sterling's legal department never read the amendment carefully. For once, their habit of underestimating me worked in my favor. At 2, 2 detectives arrived at Greyline. Natalie came with them. She wore a charcoal suit and carried a court application that had not yet been signed by a judge. Lucas, she said, Sterling Holdings has reported an unlawful intrusion into its financial network. Daniel met them at reception. My client invited law enforcement to inspect a certified forensic copy this morning. This is not a voluntary review anymore, Natalie replied. The company experienced service disruption, account lockouts, and attempted data extraction after Lucas terminated the license. Northstar did not extract data, it preserved authentication events under the contract. Your office approved. Natalie looked at me. You are monitoring private company accounts. I am recording access to my software. You are making a distinction without a difference. It is a distinction you wrote into section 14. One detective opened his notebook. Can you show us the contract? Daniel provided it. Natalie's mouth tightened as the detective read. She had approved the agreement 18 months earlier. Believing it was routine, the second detective asked to see the server environment. I took them to the isolated review room. Mara explained the chain of custody. Every file had been hashed, timestamped, and copied before Sterling received the preservation notice. We will provide a complete image to a neutral examiner, I said. We will not give Sterling direct access. Natalie placed a small evidence bag on the table. Adrian received this voice message at 11 last night. The detective played the recording. My voice filled the room. When this is over, you will not have a name, a home, or a family. I will erase you. The sentence sounded real. In my first life, it had terrified my sisters. Serena played it repeatedly during her television interview. I had spent weeks insisting I never said it. This time, I knew where it came from. May I play the complete call? I asked. Natalie's eyes narrowed. What complete call? I opened Greyline's business archive. 6 weeks earlier, Adrian had called to demand that I remove a risk alert involving one of his projects. I played the conversation. My voice said, when this audit is over, the unauthorized account will not have a name, a home address, or a family profile attached to Sterling. I will erase it from the approved vendor list. The forged threat had been assembled from that sentence. The examiner compared the waveforms. 3 cuts appeared, then 5, then 11. Natalie went still. The detective turned to her, who provided the recording. Adrian, did he say it was a voicemail? Yes, it was not. He may have received it from someone else. Did he sign the complaint? Yes. The detective wrote something down. For the first time, Natalie looked less like my sister and more like a lawyer who had discovered that her client had lied in a sworn statement. It did not make me feel better. She had believed him because she wanted to. Lucas, she said carefully, did you edit the original call after receiving the complaint? No. Grayline archives all business calls involving security instructions. The archive existed before the meeting. Daniel pointed to the preservation timestamp. Your office received notice of it last night. Natalie read the document. You knew he would use this recording. I knew he used it before. The words escaped before I could stop them. Everyone looked at me. Natalie frowned. Before when? Adrian has used edited information against me for 6 years. The method is not new. That answer satisfied no one, but Daniel redirected the discussion. The important point is that Mr. Sterling filed a complaint using fabricated evidence. The detectives requested copies and left without seizing anything. Natalie remained. You could have sent me the full call before today. You could have asked for it before accusing me of a crime. I was acting on the information available. You were acting on the information Adrian selected. Her posture stiffened. You think all 5 of us are fools? No. I think all 5 of you made the same choice because it was easier than admitting you might have loved the wrong brother. Her face lost color. Had never said it that plainly. In my first life, I softened every truth because I feared losing them. Now there was nothing left to protect. Natalie gathered her papers. I will recommend an independent examiner. You should recommend that Adrian preserve his devices. He is cooperating. He attempted to delete Grace's authentication history 40 minutes ago. She stopped. I turned the monitor toward her. The event list showed the device fingerprint, Adrian's company-issued tablet. Natalie read every line. He says Grace's token was compromised. Then why did his device try to erase the record? I do not know. You never do, but you always know enough to accuse me. She left without replying. At 4, Grace arrived alone. She refused coffee and remained standing in my conference room. I confronted him, she said, and he said you cloned my token. Did he explain why the deletion request came from his tablet? He said you spoofed the device fingerprint. Do you believe him? She looked through the glass wall at the Grayline analysts working beyond it. I do not know. Then why are you here? Because the token never left my possession. That is not true. Her eyes lifted. How would you know? 3 weeks ago, Adrian asked you to bring it to his penthouse because he claimed the security certificate needed an executive update. Grace sat down slowly. I remembered the date from my first life. She had mentioned it during an argument, after the evidence had already been deleted. I did bring it, she said, for 10 minutes. 23. How do you know that? I know Adrian. No, you know something else. I said nothing. She leaned forward. Since the board meeting, you have known exactly what he would do. You knew about the routing number. You knew he would use my token. You knew he would produce the recording. I learned what happens when I give him time to destroy evidence. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting. She stood and walked to the window. When you first came to the estate, I wanted to believe the DNA test. You told me that. I was 23. Adrian had been our brother for 9 years. He remembered Mom's favorite song. He knew where Dad hid Christmas gifts. He had a scar in the right place. Martin Hale had access to family interviews, medical records, and security reports. We did not know that. You did not want to know. She turned. That is cruel. It is accurate. Grace pressed her hands against the back of a chair. What do you want me to do? In my first life, I would have said, believe me, I would have asked her to stand beside me. I would have promised to forgive everything if one sister finally chose me. This time, I opened a secure submission page, upload the token records, write down when Adrian possessed the device, sign the statement and send it to the independent auditor. You want me to testify against him. I want you to tell the truth, and after that. There is no after that. Her face tightened. You mean between us? Yes, I am trying to help you. You are trying to correct something that now threatens you. That is not fair. You gave Adrian access to a financial authorization device. He used it to steal $12 million and blame me. You came here after his explanation stopped making sense. That is evidence. It is not loyalty. She stared at me for several seconds. Then she sat at the computer. She uploaded the records. She wrote the statement. She signed it. At the bottom, the form asked whether she consented to an independent forensic review of her Sterling devices. Grace checked yes. When she finished, she looked at me. I am sorry. I did not say I forgave her. I did not say it was enough. I only said, send a copy to your personal lawyer. At 6:12, the submission entered the audit archive. At 6:20, Adrian called her. She rejected the call. At 6:23, he sent a message, do not let Lucas divide us. Grace showed it to me. He said the same thing Victoria said yesterday, because unity is useful when no one is allowed to examine the person standing in the middle. Her phone rang again. This time, the screen displayed Sterling Rehabilitation Center. Grace answered. Her expression changed as she listened. What happened? She covered the microphone. Grandfather stopped breathing. I was already reaching for my coat. Sterling Rehabilitation Center occupied the top 4 floors of Amelia's new medical complex. The lobby displayed her photograph beside a plaque describing the building as a model of compassionate care. When Grace and I arrived, Grandfather was being transferred to intensive care. Amelia stood outside the elevator in blue scrubs. Adrian was beside her. The moment she saw me, her face hardened. You should not be here. Why did he stop breathing? This is a medical matter. He is my grandfather. Your legal status is unresolved. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder. Do not do this now, Lucas. I looked at his hand, then at Amelia. What medication did he receive in the last 12 hours? That information is confidential. I opened my phone and showed her the medical proxy Grandfather had signed 8 months earlier. The document named Amelia as primary decision-maker and me as alternate if Amelia faced a conflict involving the Sterling Trust. She had witnessed the signature herself. Her eyes moved across the page. This does not give you authority while I am present. It does if a medication order was issued through your account while you were attending the board meeting. She froze. Grace looked at her. What medication order? Amelia took the phone and reread the conflict clause. How do you know an order came through my account? Northstar flagged remote access to Sterling Health. You terminated that system. It remains in preservation mode. Adrian stepped between us. This is exactly what he wants. He is using Grandfather's condition to force access to the hospital network. No, I said. I am asking why a man in rehabilitation received an emergency increase in sedatives from a physician who was not in the building. Amelia's face changed. She turned to a nurse. Pull Henry Sterling's medication administration record. The nurse hesitated. Now, we entered a private consultation room. The record showed that Grandfather had received 2 additional doses of a sedative between midnight and 4 in the morning. The orders carried Amelia's credentials. I did not enter these, she said. Adrian leaned over the screen. Then Lucas did. Amelia looked at me. I expected accusation. Instead, she asked, can Northstar identify the device? Yes. Show me. I connected Daniel and Mara by secure video. Mara displayed the authentication record. The orders originated from an administrative workstation on the 22nd floor of Sterling Tower. Adrian's executive office. He shook his head immediately. That floor has dozens of employees. The device number ends in 471, Mara said. It is registered to your chief of staff. My staff would never issue medical orders. Someone used Amelia's credentials from that device. Adrian looked at her. You lent your tablet to Lucas last month. Amelia's eyes narrowed. For a security update. Exactly. I gave it to him in this building. The order came from Sterling Tower. He could have copied the credentials. I almost admired the speed of the lie. In my first life, it had worked. Amelia had reported me for unauthorized access. Natalie obtained an order preventing me from contacting Grandfather. Adrian then kept him sedated until the trust proxy was signed. This time, the evidence existed before the accusation. I will submit every gray line device for examination, I said. Will you submit yours? Adrian stared at me. This is not a courtroom. No, it is a hospital. A patient nearly died after someone used a stolen physician account. Amelia turned to the nurse. Lock my credentials. Suspend every non-clinical user with access to my administrative profile. Preserve the logs. Adrian's voice sharpened. Amelia, she looked at him. Give me your phone and company tablet. You cannot be serious. Grandfather is intubated, and you think I did that? I think your office appears in the access record, because Lucas put it there. Then an examination will prove it. For the first time, Adrian refused to cooperate in front of one of my sisters. He slipped his phone into his pocket. My private devices contain confidential family communications. Amelia's expression became colder. So do mine. Someone used them to alter a patient's medication. He looked at Grace. You see what he is doing? Grace did not move toward him. That was the first visible break. Adrian left the room. Amelia watched the door close. Why would he increase the sedative? Grandfather planned to request an independent trust review this week. How do you know? He told me. He tells you things he does not tell us. He tried. Adrian controls which calls reach him. That is impossible. Check the visitor log. Check the call routing settings. Check who changed his approved contact list. Amelia did. The contact list had been changed 14 days earlier. My number had been removed. The authorization was issued through her administrative account. She sat down. I did not approve this. No. How many times has this happened? Mara searched the preserved logs. 3 medication changes in the last 6 weeks, 2 contact list changes, 1 transfer request to a long-term care facility owned by Halcyon Health Management. Grace looked at me. Halcyon, the same name as the consulting company. I said. Amelia closed her eyes. For years, she had trusted systems because she believed systems did not lie. She had forgotten that systems obeyed whoever controlled the credentials. A doctor entered. Dr. Sterling, your grandfather is stable. We reduced the sedative and reversed the respiratory suppression. He is waking, but only briefly. We entered the intensive care room one at a time. Grandfather looked smaller than he had 2 days earlier. When I approached the bed, his eyes opened. Lucas, his voice was barely audible. I am here. Blue folder. What folder? My safe. Amelia knows. Amelia stepped closer. What is in it? He turned his head toward her. Adrian's proposal. His breathing grew uneven. The nurse asked us to step back. Grandfather caught my wrist. Do not sign anything. I will not. His eyes closed. Again, Amelia stared at his hand around mine. For 6 years, she had told me grandfather's affection did not prove my identity. Now the man she had been protecting from me had used his limited strength to protect me from Adrian. We went to his private office. Amelia opened the wall safe. The blue folder contained a proposed amendment to the Sterling Identity Trust. It would transfer grandfather's voting proxy to Adrian and terminate any claim by future biological challengers. Across the first page, grandfather had written in red ink, rejected, independent DNA and financial audit required. Attached was a note. Adrian pressured me to sign while medicated. Lucas must be informed. Amelia read the sentence twice. Grace sat beside her. Neither spoke. I photographed every page and sent the files to Daniel. Then I asked the question that mattered. Who had access to this safe? Amelia looked at the entry log. Victoria. Natalie, me, Adrian, not Lucas. Grace asked. No. Adrian had accused me of manipulating a document stored in a safe I could not enter. The lie was beginning to require too many other lies. Amelia called hospital security. Remove Adrian Sterling from the approved family access list. The officer hesitated. Permanently, until the investigation is complete. She then called the pharmacy director and ordered an independent medication review. When she finished, she looked at me. I should have checked. Yes, I believed I was protecting grandfather. You were protecting the version of the family that made you comfortable. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. What can I do? Keep him alive, preserve the records, report the stolen credentials, and us. There is no us. The sentence hurt her. It did not repair me. At 9:30, Amelia issued a formal incident notice. She identified her account as compromised and named Adrian's office as the source of the unauthorized orders. At 9:45, Serena called. She did not ask about grandfather, she said. You have gone too far. What did I do now? You manipulated Amelia into filing a report against Adrian. Her account was used to increase grandfather's sedatives. She is under stress. She reviewed the records. You are tearing the family apart while he is in intensive care. The family was already broken. I only stopped standing over the crack. She took a breath. Tomorrow morning, I am holding a press conference. The foundation has to address the missing money before donors hear rumors. Use the complete audit. We cannot wait for your private investigators. Then do not claim certainty. I know what the records show. No, you know what Adrian gave you. Her voice cooled. You always hated that the public accepted him. I hated that my sisters preferred a story to evidence. You will have a chance to respond after our statement. I will respond during it. She was silent. What does that mean? It means you should make sure every video you play is complete. I ended the call. Grace looked at me. Does she have the board footage? She has the version Adrian edited. How do you know? Because he used it before. Again, the words came too close to the truth. Amelia was too exhausted to question me. Grace was not, but before she could speak, Daniel sent me Serena's scheduled statement at 10 the next morning. Sterling Media would identify me as the principal suspect in the foundation theft. The press release called Adrian the family representative who had courageously uncovered the fraud in my first life. That statement destroyed my name. This time, I forwarded the complete boardroom recording to 3 independent news organizations, the foundation's outside auditors, and every donor who had attended the meeting. Then I scheduled its release for 10:05. Serena would have 5 minutes to tell Adrian's version. After that, the room would see everything he had cut away. Sterling Media's press theater held 200 people. Every seat was occupied. The front rows contained financial reporters, hospital donors, board members, and representatives from organizations that had received Sterling Foundation grants. The accusation involved charity money. Serena had turned it into a public event because she believed controlling the first headline meant controlling the truth. That strategy had made her career. It had also made her useful to Adrian. I entered through the side doors at 9:58 with Daniel and Mara. Several reporters recognized me. Cameras turned. Serena stood behind the stage curtain, speaking with her production director. When she saw me, she walked over. You were not invited. The statement concerns me. You will receive a response opportunity later. You said that last night. I am trying to prevent chaos. You scheduled a live accusation before the independent audit began. The donors require clarity. Then give them the original bank routing numbers. Her eyes flickered. Adrian's team verified the report. Adrian's team created the report. She lowered her voice. If you disrupt this event, I will have security remove you. Do that on camera. You think this is a game? No, I think you built a room full of witnesses. The stage manager called Serena's name. She looked at Daniel. If your client releases confidential company material, we will sue. Daniel handed her a copy of the preservation notice. The complete board video belongs to the foundation and was recorded in the presence of outside trustees. Your office may not selectively publish altered excerpts while suppressing the original. Her jaw tightened. You planned this. I learned from you, I said. She walked onto the stage. The lights rose. Serena had always been the most polished of my sisters. She knew exactly when to pause, when to lower her voice, and when to look directly into a camera. Yesterday evening, she began. The Sterling Foundation discovered evidence of a substantial unauthorized transfer involving an outside company controlled by Lucas Reed. My photograph appeared on the screen. Not a recent photograph, it was my intake photo from the day I first arrived at the estate, exhausted after an overnight bus ride and 3 interviews with private investigators. Serena had selected the image that made me look unstable. The foundation has placed all related accounts under review, she continued. Mr. Reed responded by terminating essential software services and threatening members of the Sterling family. The edited audio played. When this is over, you will not have a name, a home, or a family. I will erase you. Murmurs moved through the room. Serena looked directly at me. We understand that Mr. Reed disputes the evidence. However, protecting charitable assets must come before private family conflict. Adrian joined her on stage. He wore a restrained expression, as though the attention embarrassed him. I never wanted this to become public, he said. Lucas has struggled with his place in our family. We tried to support him, but his resentment grew. The lie was almost elegant. He did not call me an imposter, he called me damaged. That allowed my sisters to appear compassionate while destroying me. Reporter raised her hand. Mr. Sterling, did you personally discover the transfer? Yes, I was reviewing foundation expenses when I found payments to Reed Analytics. Did Mr. Reed have authority to initiate those payments? No. At 10:05. Phones began vibrating across the room. The complete boardroom video had been released. The first reporter opened it, then another. The screen on stage flickered as Serena's production director received an urgent message. The unedited recording began circulating. It showed Adrian presenting a document that displayed only the final 4 digits of the recipient account. It showed me asking for the full routing number. It showed Victoria refusing to delay the accusation. It showed Natalie pushing a waiver across the table. It showed all 5 sisters standing behind Adrian before an independent audit had begun. Most importantly, It showed Adrian's assistant replacing the original document on the presentation desk during a short recess. The complete audio also played my original sentence about removing an unauthorized vendor account. Reporter stood, Ms. Sterling, why did your statement describe this as a threat when the full recording concerns a database entry? Serena's producer whispered into her earpiece. She ignored him. The Foundation received a shorter recording, from whom? The material was provided through our internal review. Was it provided by Adrian Sterling? Another reporter called out. Why was the account number cropped? Adrian moved toward the microphone. These are technical distractions. The money still went to a company using Lucas's name. Mara sent the independent routing report to the press portal. The recipient bank was in Delaware. Reed Analytics banked in New York. The account holder was Halcyon Consulting. Third reporter raised her voice. Halcyon Consulting received 3 of the payments. Why did your presentation identify Reed Analytics? Adrian looked toward Serena. She looked at the control booth. The screen changed again. A spreadsheet displayed payments made by Sterling Media's promotional department to a digital engagement company called ClearCurrent. ClearCurrent was owned by Halcyon Consulting. The company had created thousands of automated accounts repeating phrases from Serena's press release before the event even began. The payments came from the missing foundation funds. Serena's face lost its polished calm. She turned to Adrian. You told me ClearCurrent was an outside crisis vendor. It is. You said Victoria approved the payment. She did. Victoria was watching from the front row. I did not approve that vendor, she said. Adrian's eyes moved around the room. The sisters who had stood behind him yesterday were no longer arranged in a protective line. Grace sat beside the independent auditor. Amelia remained at the hospital. Victoria had risen from her chair. Natalie was reading the bank report on her tablet. Serena removed her earpiece. Who gave my department the engagement instructions? My office sent recommendations. Your office sent scripts describing Lucas as a violent imposter. Because we needed to control the story, we used charitable funds. I did not know the funding source. Your administrator account approved the invoice. Adrian's voice hardened. Serena, do not lose control in front of the press. The command did what evidence had not yet done. It made her see how he viewed her, not as a sister, as a tool that had stopped functioning. Serena faced the cameras again. The Sterling Media statement issued this morning relied on material that has now been shown to be incomplete and, in part, altered. Adrian stepped toward her. She lifted one hand. I am not finished. The room became silent. I am withdrawing the allegation that Lucas Reed issued a personal threat. Sterling Media will provide its payment records, communications, and vendor instructions to the independent investigation. Adrian stared at her. You are handing him the company. No, she said. I am correcting a false statement I made. You are doing exactly what he wants. Serena looked at me. I gave her nothing, no gratitude, no approval, no sign that telling the truth had restored anything between us. Her voice weakened slightly. Lucas, can we suspend the public release until we understand what happened? No, we have already corrected the statement. You corrected it after the complete recording became public. The company could suffer permanent damage. The damage began when you used your network to convict someone before checking the evidence. Do you want to destroy us? I want every record preserved. She flinched. The reporters continued asking questions. Victoria left through the side aisle. Natalie followed Adrian backstage. Serena remained at the podium and answered for another 20 minutes. By noon, every major financial outlet had replaced its original headline. The story was no longer Sterling Air exposes family imposters foundation theft. It was Sterling Foundation used altered evidence in $12 million accusation. At 12:30, Serena came to the private conference room where Daniel, Mara, Grace, and I were reviewing the payment records. She closed the door. I sent the vendor communications. Mara checked the portal. They are arriving. Serena placed her phone on the table. Adrian's chief of staff sent the scripts 3 days ago. Before the board meeting, Grace said, yes, he planned the media response before he supposedly discovered the transfer. Serena nodded. The realization seemed to make her physically ill. I thought he was preparing for a possible crisis. You thought whatever allowed you to proceed, I said. She looked at me. I believed him. I know. I believed he was protecting the foundation. I know. I should have called you. You had 6 years to call me. She looked down. Grace reached toward her, but Serena stepped away. I am turning over everything, she said. Every email, every vendor instruction, every message. Do it through your lawyer, Daniel advised. She nodded. Before she left, she stopped beside me. Is grandfather awake? Briefly, did he ask for Adrian? He asked for me. The words hurt her more than I intended, but they were true. At 1:15. Serena formally suspended Clear Current and reported the payments. At 1:40, Natalie filed an emergency application seeking access to Greyline servers. Her application relied on a trust amendment allegedly signed by grandfather 6 weeks earlier. The document terminated my rights, transferred control to Adrian, and declared all software created during my residence at the Sterling estate to be family property. At the bottom was Natalie's electronic signature. I remembered that document. In my first life, it had been used to seize my company. I also remembered something Natalie did not. On the date she supposedly signed it, she had been flying over the Atlantic with no network connection. The evidence hearing took place 2 days later. Sterling's legal team occupied one side of the courtroom, Greyline occupied the other. Natalie sat behind outside counsel instead of arguing personally. She had not withdrawn the application, but she no longer looked certain. Adrian sat beside her. Victoria was absent. Serena and Grace sat in the public gallery. Amelia remained with grandfather. The Sterling application made 3 claims. First, Northstar had been developed using family resources. Second, I had used the software to gain unauthorized access to Sterling systems. Third, the Identity Trust Amendment gave Adrian authority over any intellectual property connected to a disputed family member. Every claim depended on the amendment. Daniel began with the software ownership records. Greyline Systems had registered the original Northstar code before I entered the Sterling estate. Development invoices, employee records, and repository timestamps showed continuous independent work. Sterling Holdings had paid a license fee, although at a significant discount. The judge looked at Sterling's counsel. If the company owned the platform, why did it sign a license? Counsel answered, the agreement was an administrative convenience. Daniel placed 3 years of invoices on the evidence screen. Sterling deducted those payments as software expenses. The judge turned another page. The company cannot describe the payments as license expenses for tax and accounting purposes, then call the same agreement a convenience when the license is terminated. Adrian whispered something to Natalie. She did not respond. The second claim collapsed under the preservation clause. Northstar did not enter Sterling's accounting system after termination. It continued recording authentication events created through its own interface for 72 hours, exactly as the contract permitted. That left the trust amendment. Sterling's outside counsel displayed the signature page. This document was approved by Henry Sterling, electronically signed by Natalie Sterling as family counsel, and certified through Veritas Sign. Daniel called the neutral electronic record examiner. The examiner presented the verification log. Natalie's account had accessed the document at 4:17 in the afternoon on August 3. Her security key authenticated the signature. Her password was entered correctly. At first, the record looked conclusive. Then the examiner displayed her travel records. At 4:17, Natalie's flight from London to New York was over the Atlantic. The aircraft did not offer internet service. Her registered laptop remained powered off from 3:40 until 9:12. Her phone was in airplane mode. The security key used to sign the document was not the key assigned to her personal device. It was a backup key stored in the Sterling legal department. The access request originated from the executive floor, Adrian's floor. Natalie stared at the screen. Sterling's counsel requested a recess. The judge refused. Your application seeks immediate seizure of a private company's servers. I intend to understand the basis before authorizing anything. The examiner continued. The signature request had been created by an administrator account belonging to Adrian's chief of staff. The remote notarization account had been accessed from the same workstation. The video verification file required by the notarization service was missing. Finally, the document metadata showed that the trust amendment had been edited after grandfather's medical sedation increased. The judge looked at Natalie. Ms. Sterling, did you sign this document? She stood slowly. No, Your Honor. Did you authorize anyone to use your electronic signature? No. Did you review the document before this application was filed? Her face tightened. I reviewed the signed copy, not the verification record. No, why not? She looked at Adrian. He did not meet her eyes. I was told the original verification package was held by our executive office. The judge denied the server seizure request. She ordered both parties to maintain all evidence and directed Sterling to submit the disputed amendment to an independent fraud examination. The hearing ended without anyone being arrested or publicly condemned. It did not need more drama. The facts had already done enough. Outside the courtroom, Reporters waited behind barriers. Natalie avoided them and entered a private consultation room. Daniel and I were preparing to leave when she asked to speak with me. Without Adrian, I said. He stood 10 feet away, his face hardened. You cannot isolate my sisters one by one. Natalie turned toward him. Did you use my backup key? No. Did your chief of staff? He manages document circulation. Did you tell him to sign the trust amendment? Grandfather approved it. The verification video is missing. Because Lucas corrupted the file. I looked at Natalie. Ask him why the draft contains a confession in my name. Her eyes narrowed. What confession? Daniel opened the forensic report. The amendment file contained deleted attachments recoverable from the document package. One was titled Lucas_read_acknowledgement_final. It stated that I had fabricated my identity, manipulated grandfather, and stolen foundation funds. The creation date was 6 weeks before the alleged theft was discovered. Natalie read the first page. Her hands began to shake. You drafted his confession before the transfer report existed. Adrian gave a short laugh. It was a contingency document. For what contingency? If Lucas became unstable, you prepared a signed confession with a blank signature field. Legal departments prepare drafts. My department did not prepare this. Then ask your staff. The author account belongs to your office. He stepped closer. Natalie, you are letting him turn a technical discrepancy into a family civil war. She looked at him for a long time. Then she removed the Sterling Legal Department access badge from her jacket. I am resigning as general counsel pending an independent investigation. His expression changed. You cannot. I can. Victoria will not accept it. I am not asking Victoria. He lowered his voice. Think carefully. Your professional reputation is attached to these documents. Yes, she said. That is why I am no longer allowing you to explain them for me. Adrian looked at me. This is what you wanted. No, I said. I wanted her to read before she accused me. Natalie left through a private exit. Adrian remained. You think this makes you part of the family? I am not trying to be part of the family. Then why are you doing this? Because you stole from my company, used my name, endangered grandfather, and planned to take assets that do not belong to you. This is about the sisters. It was. He smiled. The expression contained no warmth. That is the difference between us, Lucas. You wanted them to love you. I understood that love is only another form of control. You sound proud. I survived. So did I. He did not understand the meaning. He walked away. That afternoon, Natalie sent the independent examiner her legal department access records. She also provided a series of messages from Adrian. Need the trust package completed before Victoria reviews the merger. Use the backup authorization if necessary. Lucas cannot be allowed to trigger the identity clause. The messages did not contain a direct order to forge her signature. They did not need to. They established motive, timing, and control. At 5, the independent trustee notified all beneficiaries that the identity dispute clause had been activated. Until the DNA and fraud reviews were complete, no permanent transfer of Sterling voting rights could occur. The trust's protective vote would be assigned to the claimant supported by the earliest independently verified biological test. Me, for the first time, I possessed the authority grandfather had tried to preserve. It amounted to 11% of Sterling holdings, not enough to control the company, enough to block a major asset sale. At 6, Victoria announced an emergency board meeting for the next morning. Sterling Holdings faced a liquidity problem. Donors were suspending commitments. The bank wanted replacement support for the hospital loan. Northstar remained offline. The foundation scandal had damaged the share price of 2 affiliated companies. Victoria proposed one solution: a rapid merger with Blackridge Capital. In my first life, the merger transferred Sterling's patents, hospitals, media licenses, and real estate into a Blackridge-controlled structure. 6 months later, Sterling Holdings no longer existed. Adrian received a hidden payment for delivering the deal. I opened the merger package. The documents were almost identical to those I remembered. This time, however, I had 11% of the vote, for sisters who had begun preserving evidence, and the original transaction logs. Victoria still believed Adrian was trying to save the family. By the end of the meeting, she would learn that she was the last asset he intended to sell. Sterling Tower's main boardroom had 40 seats and no windows. Victoria said windows distracted people from difficult decisions. That morning, the absence of windows made the room feel sealed. Blackridge Capital sent 3 executives and 6 attorneys. Sterling's directors received the final merger package. 22 Minutes before the meeting, the speed was intentional, people made expensive mistakes when urgency replaced examination. Victoria stood at the head of the table. We have 48 hours before First Atlantic requires confirmation of replacement credit support. Several donors have suspended commitments, our compliance platform is inactive, and the market is reacting to false public speculation. She looked at me when she said false. Even after everything, part of her still wanted the crisis to be my fault. Blackridge will provide immediate liquidity, assume the hospital facility, and fund an independent review of the foundation. A Blackridge executive advanced the presentation. The proposed transaction valued Sterling Holdings at 62% of its assessment from 6 months earlier. Voting control would transfer to Blackridge. Sterling's hospitals would be separated from the family foundation. Sterling Media's broadcast licenses would become collateral. The family trust would retain a minority economic interest but lose operational control. Adrian sat at Victoria's right hand. He was no longer officially representing the foundation, but Victoria had invited him as a family beneficiary. Grace sat farther down the table. Amelia joined by video from grandfather's hospital room. Serena sat with outside media counsel. Natalie attended as an individual beneficiary, not as family counsel. The arrangement told me everything. My sisters had stopped standing behind Adrian. They had not yet learned how to stand together without him. Victoria turned to me. The identity trustee informed us that you intend to exercise the protective vote. Yes, if you block this transaction, Sterling Health may lose its financing. Blackridge does not intend to preserve Sterling Health. The Blackridge executive smiled politely. Our plan provides complete funding by selling the rehabilitation properties after closing. That is one strategic option. It is required under Schedule 9. Victoria opened the document. Schedule 9 had not been included in the summary deck. She read the property list. The new Queens Rehabilitation Center appeared first. Amelia's image on the screen went still. You told us the facilities would remain under Sterling Health, she said. The executive replied, operational continuity does not require permanent real estate ownership. You plan to sell the buildings and lease them back. That is a common capital efficiency structure, at triple the current occupancy cost, I said. Victoria turned another page. Why was this not in the presentation? Adrian leaned toward her. We discussed sale-leaseback options. No, she said, you told me Blackridge would assume the construction debt. It will, after acquiring the underlying property. It is still debt relief. The distinction mattered. Victoria had built her authority on never missing contractual details. Adrian had counted on panic making her careless. I connected my laptop to the board display. The acquisition vehicle is called BRC. Sterling Partners. 38% of its private participation units are reserved for advisory partners. Blackridge Council objected. Those allocations are confidential. They were funded through Sterling Foundation money. Mara displayed the transfer map. Halcyon Consulting had received the missing $12 million. Halcyon transferred $7 million to a holding company. That holding company purchased participation rights in BRC Sterling Partners. The beneficial ownership declaration named Martin Hale. A second agreement promised Adrian a 4% transaction fee after the merger closed. The room became silent. Victoria looked at Adrian. You have a financial interest in the buyer. No, your name is on the agreement. That document was drafted but never executed. The escrow account was funded yesterday, Grace said. She placed her token report on the table. The first foundation transfer used my authorization device. Adrian possessed it on the date the security certificate was copied. Adrian looked at her. You already told me Lucas cloned it. I told you that was your explanation. It is the truth. The device fingerprint came from your penthouse. He fabricated the fingerprint. Amelia spoke from the screen. Did he also fabricate the medication orders from your office? Adrian's face hardened. You are a doctor, Amelia. You know how easily electronic records can be altered. I know you refused to surrender your devices after grandfather nearly died. Serena added a folder to the evidence table. Did Lucas fabricate the media scripts your office sent 3 days before the alleged theft was discovered? Adrian turned toward her. You agreed that a crisis plan was necessary. I agreed to prepare facts. You sent a predetermined accusation. Natalie placed the electronic signature report beside Serena's folder, and you used my backup key. I did not. Your chief of staff did. Then speak to him. He resigned this morning and delivered his company laptop to the independent examiner. That was new information. Adrian's control slipped for the first time. Victoria remained standing at the head of the table. She looked from one sister to the next, then at me. You coordinated this. No, You brought them here with separate accusations. They brought records from the systems Adrian used. You expect me to believe that he manipulated every division of this family without any of us noticing? That is exactly what happened. Her face tightened. You always wanted his place. I wanted my own. You returned and challenged the only brother we knew. I returned with a DNA result. You returned with a claim that required us to erase 14 years of our lives. No, it required you to examine whether those years were built on fraud. The sentence landed harder than anger would have. Victoria looked at Adrian. He softened his expression. Vicky, do not let him rewrite our family because he found frightened people willing to blame me. Vicky, the childhood name only Adrian used for years. It had been proof of intimacy. Now it sounded like a lever. He continued, I found the transfer because I was trying to protect you. I arranged Blackridge because Lucas withdrew the system and the guarantee. Every crisis in this room began when he decided to punish us. Victoria looked at the merger agreement, then at the secret fee. You did not tell me you would be paid. I was offered compensation for transition work, 4% of the transaction. I intended to place it in the family trust. There is no such clause. It would have been added. You told Blackridge I would sign before receiving the final schedules. I was confident in you. No, I said, you were confident in what she would do after you made me the enemy. I played the recovered executive call. Adrian's voice filled the boardroom. Victoria will sign. She is terrified of looking weak. Keep the deadline short and make sure Lucas appears responsible for the liquidity problem. Once she believes he is attacking the family, she will approve anything that promises control. No one moved. The call had been stored on a company conferencing system. Adrian's chief of staff had included it in the device archive after resigning. Victoria listened to the recording twice. The second time, she closed her eyes. Adrian pushed back his chair. This is illegal surveillance. It is a company-recorded transaction call, Natalie said. You are all accepting his version because you are afraid of your own mistakes. Victoria opened her eyes. No, her voice was quiet. That made everyone listen. I am accepting your voice. Adrian stared at her. She turned to the corporate secretary. Remove the Blackridge resolution. Victoria, the Blackridge executive said, the financing deadline. We will address it without selling the company to a vehicle funded by stolen foundation assets. She then called for a second motion, effective immediately. Adrian Sterling is suspended from every executive, foundation, trust, and administrative position pending completion of the independent investigation. Adrian stood. You cannot remove me from my own family. This is a board action. I built this company with you. You built a transaction to sell it. I was saving it from him. He pointed at me. Victoria looked at his hand. For 6 years, she had followed that gesture. Whenever something failed, Adrian pointed toward me. Whenever a document looked wrong, he pointed toward me. Whenever a sister questioned him, he pointed toward me. This time, Victoria lowered her own hand and voted. Grace voted with her. Amelia voted by video. Serena voted. Natalie voted her trust interest. Exercised the protective 11%. The motion passed. Adrian was removed. Security waited outside the boardroom, but Victoria allowed him to leave without public escort. She was still protecting the final pieces of the family image. As he walked past me, he said, you think they chose you? No, they chose themselves. I know. That should hurt. It would have. Once, he stopped. You will never be their brother. That is no longer a threat. He left. The Blackridge executives collected their documents and withdrew the offer. The directors remained in silence. Victoria sat down for the first time. What happens now? She asked. Sterling replaces the hospital guarantee, I said. The foundation freezes every account connected to Halcyon. Greyline provides a limited compliance bridge under market terms. An independent committee controls the data. You will restore Northstar, for 30 days, no family administrator access, no discounted license, no direct control. Her expression changed. You are charging us during a crisis. I am treating Sterling like a client. We are your family. For days earlier, that sentence might have broken me. Now it sounded like a late invoice. No, I said, you are an organization under investigation. At 2:30, the board approved the temporary agreement. At 3. First Atlantic accepted the replacement compliance structure and extended the financing deadline. Sterling would survive, not because I returned to the family, because I imposed the boundaries I should have imposed years earlier. As I left the tower, my phone displayed a message from Adrian. Want to know why you disappeared? Come to the old records annex at 10, alone. In my first life, he had sent a different version. I found the original DNA file. Come alone if you want your sisters to believe you. I had gone on the river bridge. My brakes failed. This time, I forwarded the message to Daniel, Mara, the independent trustee, and Sterling's external security investigator. Then I replied, I will be there. I did not include the word alone. The old records annex stood beneath a decommissioned Sterling printing plant in Brooklyn. The building had been scheduled for demolition twice but remained standing because its basement contained decades of legal files. In my first life, Adrian claimed the original DNA laboratory archive was stored there. He instructed me to enter through the south gate and leave my phone in the car. I obeyed because I believed one piece of paper might make 5 sisters love me. After I found the files, a vehicle followed me onto the river bridge. The brake line in my car had been cut. This time, I arrived in Daniel's car. The independent security team entered first. Every room used for the meeting was inspected. The loading dock cameras were activated. A temporary recording notice was posted at each entrance. No one entering the building could later claim the meeting was private. Victoria objected to my presence. You should not be here. He contacted me. That is why you should stay away. In my first life, I did. She looked at me. I corrected myself. In the life I had before this family, I spent years avoiding conflict. It solved nothing. The explanation did not satisfy her. But she had no authority to remove me. The 5 sisters waited in the central archive room. It was the first time I had seen all of them together since the board accusation. Grace stood closest to the door. Amelia had left grandfather with an independent physician. Natalie carried no family legal badge. Serena wore no makeup and had kept the press away. Victoria still looked like a chief executive, but the certainty had left her posture. You said Adrian believes we are helping him leave. I said. Victoria nodded. He contacted me after the board meeting. He said Martin has the original identity records and will surrender them if we release funds. How much? 20 million. He does not need 20 million to surrender records. He needs it to disappear. Natalie said. You agreed. We told him the trust could release emergency family protection funds. The trust cannot. He does not know that Grace informed us of the identity clause. Grace looked at me. We thought he would bring Martin. He will. How can you be certain? Adrian has never handled the original fraud himself. Martin gave him the family history, arranged the first DNA test, and controlled the hospital security contractor. Victoria's expression hardened. You knew that before the board meeting. I suspected it. You should have told us. I did, when, 6 years ago. She looked away. At 9:47, exterior cameras recorded a black vehicle entering the south lot. Adrian arrived first. Martin Hale followed. I had seen Martin only 3 times. He was 60, broad-shouldered, with gray hair and the careful posture of someone who had spent a career observing exits. He carried a metal document case. Adrian stopped when he saw me. You told me he would not be here. Victoria answered. He controls the protective vote. You said you wanted to solve this as a family. We are. Martin looked toward the recording notice. What is this? Corporate security procedure, Natalie said. Every meeting in the archive is recorded during the investigation. We did not consent. You were notified before entering. Adrian looked at the 5 sisters. You are treating me like a criminal. Grace replied first. You used my authorization token. I explained that. Amelia said. You used my medical credentials. Lucas created those records. Serena said. You funded a media attack before the alleged theft was discovered. I was protecting the company. Natalie said. You forged my signature. I did not. Victoria placed the Blackridge fee agreement on the table. You sold my company. Adrian looked at each of them, then he laughed. The sound held no humor. This is what he wanted from the beginning. 5 women turning on the brother who stayed because a stranger arrived with a laboratory report. I stepped forward, opened the case. Martin placed one hand on the handle. Funds first. There are no funds, I said. Victoria's eyes moved to me, but she did not contradict me. Adrian's face changed. You promised him, Victoria answered. I promised to hear what you wanted to sell. You lied. Yes. He stared at her. For years, deception had been a weapon only he was allowed to use. You would never have done this before Lucas came back, he said. No, she replied. Before Lucas came back, I believed you. Martin moved toward the door. Security blocked the corridor. No one is being detained, Daniel said from the observation room speaker. However, the document case is subject to the existing preservation order if it contains Sterling records. Martin looked up at the camera. You think recordings make you powerful? No, I said. They make denial harder. Adrian turned toward me. You want the truth? Fine, you were never supposed to come back. The room became still. Martin said, stop talking. Adrian ignored him. My father found you first. The 5 sisters looked at Martin. When? Grace asked. Martin's jaw tightened. Adrian answered, 8 months before grandfather's investigator contacted Lucas. A cold pressure moved through my chest. That was new. Even in my first life, I had never learned it. Where was I asked. Working at your foster mother's machine shop, Adrian said. You had submitted DNA to an ancestry database after she became ill. Martin received the match through a contractor. Why did you not tell the family? Because I was already their son. You knew I was biological. I knew you matched grandfather's line. And you arranged the second test. I arranged a test that protected the family from a man trying to destroy it. You switched the samples, Natalie said. Adrian looked at her. You signed the lab authorization. I signed an authorization for witnessed samples, and trusted staff completed it. Martin's staff, I said. Martin remained silent. Adrian continued because he could not tolerate silence when he believed he was losing control. Do you know what would have happened if they accepted you? Every photograph, every birthday, every memory would have become a lie. They became a lie anyway. Serena said, no, they were real until he arrived. Amelia stepped forward. You sedated grandfather. I kept an old man from making an emotional decision that would destroy all of us. You almost killed him. He was monitored. You changed his medication under my name, because you would have refused. The admission hung in the room. Amelia's face went white. Adrian looked at Victoria. You understand. You always understood. Someone had to make decisions the rest of you were too weak to make. Victoria's voice was quiet. You used us. I protected you. You described me to Blackridge as predictable. You were predictable. He turned to Grace. You wanted everyone to like you, so one apology kept you silent. To Amelia, he said, you cared more about appearing ethical than checking who used your accounts. To Natalie, you believed a signature because admitting you had lost control would damage your reputation. To Serena, you would broadcast any story that allowed you to define the family first. Finally, he faced Victoria, and you would sacrifice any person if I called it stability. No sister answered. He had spent years studying their weaknesses. They had mistaken that attention for love. Grace's voice broke the silence. What did you plan to do to Lucas after the audit? Martin said. That is enough. Adrian smiled at me. He already knows. Say it, I replied. You were going to find the original file. You were going to leave angry. Your car was going to fail. My hands went cold. The river returned for 1 second. Black water. A locked seatbelt. 5 unanswered calls. Victoria whispered, what car? Adrian's smile faded when he saw her face. Nothing happened, because he did not come alone. Grace said. Martin reached for the metal case. Security stepped closer. He released it. Natalie opened the case under the camera. Inside were laboratory intake forms, copied security reports, childhood interview transcripts, and 2 encrypted storage devices. One form showed that the blood sample submitted under Adrian Sterling's name came from a preserved Sterling family medical specimen. Another showed that my sample had been replaced before testing its Sterling health. The storage device contained messages between Adrian and Martin. One thread discussed the bridge route I had taken in my first life. Prepare the vehicle only if he leaves with the archive. Make it look mechanical. No connection to Sterling security. The plan had existed in this timeline too. It had not yet been carried out. I did not need anyone to believe the memory of my death. The intent was written in front of them. Adrian lunged toward the storage device. Grace moved the case away. He reached the shredding console and inserted the second drive. The machine pulled it inside. For 1 second, he looked relieved. Then I turned my laptop around. Remote archive complete. The drive had synchronized the moment Natalie connected it to the evidence reader. You always thought destroying the object destroyed the truth, I said. He stared at the screen outside. Investigators entered the room. They had been waiting for evidence of financial fraud and document destruction. The recorded admissions expanded the investigation. Martin said nothing as they secured the case. Adrian continued looking at my sisters. Are you really choosing him? Victoria answered. We are choosing the evidence you spent years teaching us to ignore. You will regret this. No, Grace said. We regret what we already did. Investigators escorted Martin and Adrian from the archive for formal questioning. They were not yet convicted. They were not even formally charged with every act we had uncovered, but they no longer controlled the records. After they left, Serena found one final file in the case, a video labeled Catherine Sterling, private, our mother's name. Victoria reached for it. I stopped her. It concerns my identity. She was our mother too. And all 5 of you used her memory to tell me I did not belong. No one argued. I placed the video in the independent evidence archive. It would be played at the Foundation Summit in front of trustees, lawyers, and witnesses, not in a private room where the family could reinterpret it later. Adrian had claimed the video would prove our mother chose him. Perhaps it would. No longer needed her choice either. The Sterling Foundation Summit had been scheduled months earlier. More than 400 donors, trustees, hospital partners, employees, and reporters attended. In my first life, the event celebrated Adrian's appointment as permanent family representative. I watched from a rented apartment while Serena described him as the brother who had protected the family through a painful fraud investigation. 3 days later, I lost access to the estate. 1 month later, I signed away the trust. This time, the stage contained 6 chairs, 1 for each Sterling sibling under review. The organizers had placed Adrian's name on the 6th chair before the investigation expanded. The card remained there, though the chair was empty. My 5 sisters sat in the first 5 seats. I stood at a separate witness table beside Daniel and Mara. The physical distance mattered. We were not presenting ourselves as a reunited family, we were presenting evidence. The independent trustee opened the meeting. This proceeding will address the disputed identity trust, the unauthorized foundation transfers, the compromised medical and legal accounts, and the proposed Blackridge transaction. The first evidence concerned the money. Mara explained how the $12 million moved through Halcyon Consulting and Branton Advisory before funding participation rights in the Blackridge acquisition vehicle. Grace testified that Adrian borrowed her hardware token under the pretense of updating its certificate. Did Lucas Reed ever possess the token? The trustee asked. No. Did he ask you to approve any of the transfers? No. Why did you initially support the accusation against him? Grace looked toward me. I did not rescue her from the answer. Because Adrian told me Lucas had cloned the device, she said. I accepted that explanation before checking the location record. Why? Because I trusted Adrian and distrusted Lucas. The sentence was plain. No excuse, no claim that she had been manipulated beyond choice, that honesty mattered more than tears would have. Amelia testified next. She identified the medication orders placed through her credentials, the device location in Adrian's office, and grandfather's respiratory emergency. Did Mr. Reed alter the patient record? No. Did you previously restrict his access to Henry Sterling? Yes. On what basis? I believed his identity remained unresolved and that his presence agitated the family. Did Henry Sterling ask to see him? Yes. Did Adrian Sterling interfere with those requests? Yes. Her voice almost broke. She continued, I allowed my concern for family stability to override my responsibility to verify who was changing a patient's medication. That was my failure. Serena testified about the media campaign. She presented the scripts, payment records, bot network contracts, and edited audio. Why did you release the accusation before the audit? The trustee asked. I wanted to control the public narrative. Was that decision requested by Lucas Reed? No. Was it requested by Adrian Sterling? Yes. Did he provide the material? Yes. Did you verify it independently? No. Natalie testified about the electronic signature and trust amendment. She explained that her backup security key had been used while she was in flight. She admitted she filed the server seizure request without reviewing the full verification package. Why? The trustee asked. Because I assumed Adrian's office had completed the process correctly. Would you have made the same assumption if the document benefited Lucas? Natalie looked down. No. That answer moved through the room like a current. The unequal standard was finally public. Victoria testified last. She described the Blackridge merger, the concealed schedules, the secret participation units, and Adrian's recorded statement about manipulating her fear of appearing weak. Did Lucas Reed create Sterling's liquidity crisis? The trustee asked. No. His license termination exposed existing unauthorized transactions. His guarantee withdrawal created a replacement deadline, but it did not create the underlying debt. Did he attempt to force Sterling Holdings into his control? No. Did he request appointment as chief executive? No. Did he request that you recognize him as your brother in exchange for restoring services? Victoria's eyes moved toward me. No. What did he request? Independent control of evidence, commercial payment for his software, removal of compromised access, verification of the trust, everything I should have demanded from the beginning. The trustee called for the identity evidence. The original independent DNA report from 6 years earlier was displayed first. It showed a direct biological relationship between grandfather and me. The second test, arranged through Sterling Health, had declared no relationship. The laboratory access records from Martin's archive showed that my sample had been replaced. Adrian's sample had been matched using preserved biological material belonging to my late father. The fraud was technical, deliberate, and documented. 3 days before the summit, new samples had been collected under independent observation from me, grandfather, and all 5 sisters. The results confirmed that I was their biological brother. No one applauded. The truth was too ugly for celebration. The trustee then played our mother's video. Catherine Sterling appeared on the screen in a hospital room. The date showed that the recording had been made 8 months before her death and 2 years after Adrian entered the family. She looked tired but clear. If this recording is being viewed, she said, then my concerns about the identity investigation were not resolved. Victoria covered her mouth. Our mother continued. Adrian has brought comfort to our daughters during years of grief. That comfort is real, regardless of biology. But the laboratory report identifying him as our missing son contains inconsistencies that Martin Hale has not explained. Adrian had lied. She had not chosen him. She had questioned him. I have requested a second independent review outside Sterling Health. No child should be discarded because another child is loved. If our son is still alive, we owe him truth before we ask him for forgiveness. The video paused as she looked away from the camera. Then she spoke directly to my sisters. Victoria, do not confuse control with protection. Amelia, compassion without examination can still cause harm. Natalie, a signed document is not the same as truth. Serena, a story repeated first is not always the right story. Grace, kindness in private does not excuse silence in public. The 5 women sat motionless. The message had been recorded before they grew into the exact weaknesses Adrian later exploited. Finally, our mother said, do not choose the child who is easier to love, choose what is true, and accept the cost of having ignored it. The screen went dark. The trustee asked whether any beneficiary challenged the new identity result. One by one, my sisters answered, no. The trustee asked whether they continued supporting Adrian's claim to the identity trust. Victoria spoke first. No. Amelia followed. No. Natalie, no. Serena, no. Grace looked at the empty chair. No. For 6 years, they had stood behind him. Now, in front of everyone whose opinion they once valued more than my pain, they withdrew. The trustee confirmed my status as the biological Sterling son and the protected beneficiary of the identity trust. Then it was my turn to speak. I approached the microphone. Cameras moved toward me. I had imagined this moment in my first life. I imagined my sisters embracing me. I imagined Victoria calling me her brother. I imagined Adrian being dragged away while the entire family admitted I had been right. Those fantasies had kept me trapped. Now, looking at the 5 women on stage, I felt no triumph, only clarity. My name is Lucas Reed, I said. The evidence confirms that I was born Lucas Sterling. It does not erase the family that raised me after I disappeared, and it does not erase the decisions made after I returned. I displayed the software agreement. Northstar belongs to Greyline Systems. Sterling Holdings will continue using it only under an independent commercial contract. I displayed the trust proposal. I will retain the assets legally assigned to me. I will not transfer them to Adrian, my sisters, or any family executive. I displayed the public statements issued against me. Every false accusation must be corrected through the same channels used to publish it. Finally, I placed the family settlement on the table. I am not requesting a home at the Sterling estate, a position in Sterling Holdings, or recognition through a private family declaration. Victoria stared at the document. What are you requesting? Distance. The word entered the microphone. The entire room heard it. Grace closed her eyes. I continued. I spent 6 years trying to prove I deserved to be treated as a brother. During that time, each of my sisters made deliberate choices. Adrian manipulated them, but he did not control their hands when they signed documents, restricted medical access, published accusations, or demanded that I surrender my property. No one interrupted. They have now told the truth. That is necessary. It is not reconciliation. At the rear of the hall, investigators entered with Adrian and Martin's attorneys. The 2 men had been brought to attend the trust determination under formal notice. Adrian looked at the stage. 5 sisters, 5 retractions, no one beside him. He laughed once, then he shouted, he took my family. I looked at him. You had a family, you turned it into evidence. Investigators escorted him from the room after he attempted to approach the witness area. The summit continued. The trust resolution passed, the foundation froze every Halcyon-connected asset. Blackridge formally withdrew, Sterling Media issued corrections, Sterling Health announced an external medication review, the board removed Adrian's remaining privileges. By the end of the day, the fake heir had lost the position he spent 14 years protecting. After the cameras shut down, my sisters approached me together. It was the formation I had once wanted more than anything. Victoria spoke. What can we do? Comply with the settlement. I mean to bring you home. I have a home, Lucas. Gray said, we know the truth now. You knew enough to investigate 6 years ago. We were wrong. Yes. Amelia took a step forward. We turned against him, because the evidence reached each of you personally. That is not the only reason. It was the reason you finally listened. Serena wiped her face. Do you hate us? No. The answer surprised them. Hatred required a relationship I no longer maintained. I am done giving you that much control. I signed the settlement. Daniel placed it. In his case, my sisters had finally chosen the real heir. They were too late to choose their brother. The legal and corporate consequences took months. Truth moved quickly in public. Accountability moved through documents, interviews, hearings, and negotiations. Adrian and Martin were investigated for identity fraud, wire fraud, forged records, attempted destruction of evidence, unauthorized access to medical systems, and conspiracy connected to the planned vehicle sabotage. The charges did not depend on my memory of dying, they depended on the messages recovered from Martin's archive and the preparations already made in this timeline. Mechanic associated with Martin had inspected my car 2 days before the Foundation accusation. He claimed it was routine. Payment records showed Halcyon Consulting had transferred him money. Vehicle surveillance showed him accessing the underside of my car in the Sterling garage. The brake line had not yet been cut. The plan was incomplete, but it was no longer deniable. Martin negotiated first. He admitted that, 14 years earlier, he used family security files to train Adrian in details of the missing child's life. He arranged a false DNA match using preserved medical material. When my independent database result appeared, he intercepted the notice and delayed contact with the family. He then manipulated the second test to discredit me. Adrian refused to admit anything for longer. He insisted he had become the true son through years of love and that biology did not matter. Biology was not the crime. The fraud, theft, forged signatures, medical interference, and planned violence were the crimes. That distinction mattered to me. I did not want the story reduced to one adopted child being displaced by a biological one. Adrian could have remained part of the family. Grandfather had offered him a separate trust even after my first test. He rejected coexistence because he wanted exclusivity. He did not lose the family because I returned. He lost it because he believed love required removing every possible rival. The sisters faced different consequences. Victoria resigned as acting chief executive after the board concluded that she had rushed the Blackridge transaction and ignored conflict disclosures. She remained a shareholder but lost operational authority. Sterling Holdings appointed an outside chief executive and established an independent compliance committee. Victoria had spent her life believing she alone could hold the family together. Now she had to watch professionals rebuild structures she had weakened through personal loyalty. Amelia stepped down as chair of the Sterling Health Foundation. The medical review found no evidence that she personally ordered the additional sedatives, but it criticized her failure to secure administrative credentials and her delay in questioning access restrictions around grandfather. She returned to clinical work under external oversight. Natalie reported the signature compromise to the relevant professional authorities and withdrew from every Sterling legal matter. She was not accused of intentionally forging the document, but her name remained attached to the application based on it. For the first time, she had to accept that technical legality could not repair moral negligence. Serena lost her seat on the media board. She spent weeks issuing corrections through the same network she had used to condemn me. Every correction included the complete board footage, the false audio analysis, and a statement accepting responsibility for publishing before verification. Grace remained with the independent audit until every foundation transaction was reviewed. Afterward, she resigned from Sterling Ventures. She was the only sister who asked for no replacement title. None of those consequences came from private revenge. They followed from their own records. I did not demand that Victoria lose her job. I demanded the board review her decisions. I did not demand that Serena be removed. I demanded Public correction, I did not report Amelia as the person who ordered the sedatives. I preserved the access history. For years, my sisters had accused me of wanting to punish them. When I finally had the power to do so, I chose procedure instead. Procedure was colder, it also lasted longer. Grandfather recovered slowly. I visited him twice a week at an independent rehabilitation center. No Sterling administrator controlled his calls, no family member could alter his medication without dual approval. One afternoon, he placed the Sterling signet ring on the table between us. Victoria had returned it after the summit. I gave this to you because I wanted you to know you belonged, he said. I know, you left it in the boardroom. It became a test I was always failing. He looked older than before, but his eyes were clear. The board wants you to become chairman. No, you have the votes. I have enough votes to protect my assets. I do not want to run Sterling. It is your inheritance. Ownership is not obligation. You could change the company. I already changed my relationship with it. He studied me. You sound like your foster mother. That is a compliment. Yes. He turned the ring in his fingers. She raised you well. She believed me before I had evidence. The words hurt him. He accepted the pain without defending himself. I should have done more, he said. You believed the first test. I allowed my granddaughters to treat belief as optional. You were trying to keep the family together. That excuse has done enough damage. He pushed the ring toward me. You do not have to wear it, but it belongs to you. I picked it up, not as a symbol of family, as property that had once been used to measure my obedience. I placed it in my pocket. I will keep it in the trust archive. He nodded. It was not the answer he wanted. He did not ask again. The settlement meeting with my sisters took place at Daniel's office. Each arrived separately. Victoria came first. She placed a handwritten letter on the table. I listed every time I remember choosing Adrian's explanation over yours. I do not need the list. I do. That is your work, not mine. She accepted that. I kept telling you trust had to be earned. Yes, I never asked him to earn it. No, I thought protecting the family meant removing whoever created uncertainty. You removed the person asking questions. I know. She looked at me. I am not asking you to call me your sister today. Good. I am asking whether there could ever be a day, I do not know, live without expecting one. She left the letter. I did not read it. Amelia arrived next. She brought no letter. I changed hospitals, she said. I could not walk into grandfather's old room without seeing the order. You did not enter it. I created the conditions that allowed it to be trusted. She looked at her hands. When you first came home, you asked me to explain the scar on your shoulder. I refused because Adrian had a scar in the same place. Martin copied the childhood medical file. I know. You did not then. I could have checked. Yes. She looked up. I am sorry. I know. There was nothing more to say. Natalie brought the original surrender agreement from the first board meeting, the one I refused to sign. She placed it in a shred box and destroyed it in front of me. I thought this would feel meaningful, she said. It is paper. It would have taken your trust rights. I read it this time. She flinched. I depended on you not reading. You depended on me wanting your approval. More than my own protection, yes. She left without requesting forgiveness. Serena gave me a complete archive of every correction her network had issued. You should keep this in case anyone repeats the accusation. Grayline already archived it, of course. She gave a tired smile. You always prepared for the thing we said would never happen, because it usually happened. Her smile disappeared. The first intake photograph has been removed from every Sterling system. That does not erase the broadcast. No. She hesitated. I used the worst image of you because I knew it would make people distrust you. I know. I wanted the audience to decide before you spoke. They did. I am sorry. I nodded once. Grace came last. She carried a small cardboard box. Inside was a wooden model airplane. I made it when I was 9. My foster father taught me to cut and sand the pieces. When I first arrived at the estate, Grace found it in my room. Adrian told her it resembled a model their father once gave him. She took it to compare the two and never returned it. I found this in Adrian's storage, she said. I lifted the model. One wing had cracked. He kept it. He labeled it evidence of copied memories. It came from the machine shop where I grew up. I know that now. She sat across from me. I keep thinking about the day you arrived. So do I. You stood in the foyer with one bag. Victoria asked what you wanted. You said you wanted to meet your family. Yes, Adrian said you rehearsed it, and all of you believed him. I did. She swallowed. I was kind to you when no one watched. That made you feel better. Yes. It did not protect me. No. She wiped her face. I testified that you were unstable. Yes, I told myself I was preventing you from making things worse. You were protecting your place beside them. Yes, that was the closest any of them came to understanding. Grace did not ask me to forgive her. She only said, I will not contact you unless you initiate it. Thank you. She stood at the door. She looked back. Truth late is still truth, yes, but it is not loyalty. No. I took the model airplane to the old Reed machine shop that evening. The property had remained closed since my foster mother died. Dust covered the machines. Her handwritten safety rules were still taped beside the drill press. My foster father's old radio sat on a shelf. This place had never contained marble floors, family portraits, or inherited power. It contained work. It contained people who had loved me before they knew whether I was valuable. I placed the repaired model airplane on the front desk. Then I called my Gray Line operations director. I found our new headquarters. Renovating the machine shop took 9 months. We preserved the brick walls and steel beams but replaced the roof, wiring, and loading systems. The original workshop became a training laboratory where junior analysts learned how financial fraud moved through ordinary businesses. The upper floors housed Gray Line's engineering teams. A new glass structure connected the old building to a community center funded through my trust distribution. I named the center the Reed Identity Project. It provided technical support to organizations handling missing person records, adoption fraud, identity theft, and disputed family documentation. I did not create it because I believed every biological family should be reunited. My own life had cured me of that fantasy. I created it because no person should depend on a powerful family's willingness to examine evidence. North Star expanded. After the Sterling scandal, hospitals, foundations, universities, and private companies requested independent licensing. Gray Line stopped accepting arrangements in which family officers controlled audit records. Every major client had to appoint an outside evidence custodian. Every high-risk login generated a separate immutable archive. Every executive exception required 2 independent approvals. The safeguards were built from the exact weaknesses Adrian had exploited. A year after the board meeting, Gray Line employed 180 people. Sterling Holdings became one client among many. It paid the full rate. Victoria never requested a discount. The outside chief executive stabilized the hospital debt without Blackridge. Several non-essential properties were sold, but the rehabilitation center remained open. Sterling Media separated its news operation from family communications. The foundation recovered part of the stolen money through frozen halcyon assets. The company survived. That mattered because thousands of employees had not chosen what my sisters did. I had no desire to punish them for a family's failure. Adrian eventually entered a guilty plea covering the financial transfers, forged identity records, unauthorized system access, and conspiracy involving my vehicle. Martin entered a separate plea and provided the full history of the impersonation scheme. Their sentences were substantial. I did not attend the final hearing. Daniel did. He called. Afterward, Adrian asked whether you submitted a victim statement. I did not. He expected one. He expected to remain the center of my life. You are allowed to be angry. I am. You do not sound angry. Anger does not require an audience. After the call, I returned to the launch preparation for the Reed Identity Project. Mara was reviewing the donor transparency dashboard. She had become Gray Line's chief audit officer. There was no romance between us, no dramatic rescue. She respected evidence, boundaries, and complete sentences. That was enough for a partnership. The Sterling Trust transfer cleared. She said, grandfather had distributed the portion of the identity trust that legally belonged to me. I retained the 11% Sterling interest through an independent holding structure. I did not join the board. My voting rights activated only for transactions involving asset sales, identity trusts, or Gray Line property. The rest of the assets funded the Reed Identity Project and diversified investments. Had ownership without surrendering my life to the family company. Any conditions? I asked. None. Good. There is one message from Henry Sterling. Grandfather had moved to a smaller private residence after leaving rehabilitation. I visited monthly now, not twice a week. The relationship was real, but limited. His message read, the estate is being sold. Your mother's private belongings will be available Saturday. You may collect anything listed under your name. I had no emotional attachment to the estate, but my mother's letters remained there, along with an old recording cabinet and a box of childhood objects recovered after my disappearance. I agreed to go. Saturday morning, the gates opened without security questions. The lawns were no longer perfect, Moving trucks stood beside the main entrance. Auction labels marked furniture that had occupied the same rooms for decades. The estate had once seemed permanent, now it looked like any building after the people inside lost the story that held it together. Victoria waited in the foyer. She no longer wore executive suits every day. She worked as an advisor to a regional manufacturing company, far below the position she once held. "You came," she said. "I said I would. The boxes are in Mother's music room. My 5 sisters were there. No one had told me they would be." I stopped in the doorway. Gray stood immediately. "We can leave." "No, I will collect the property and go." The room contained 6 labeled boxes, 1 for each of us. My box held letters, photographs, a silver compass, and a small blue blanket preserved from infancy. There was also an unfinished family portrait. 5 girls stood beside our parents, between Grace and our mother. The artist had sketched the outline of a small boy, me. The portrait had been commissioned before I disappeared. Our mother never completed it. Serena touched the edge of the canvas. "We thought you might want it." "I do not. It proves she expected you," Amelia said. "I do not need proof that my mother expected me." Natalie looked at the empty outline. "We were considering finishing it." "With what? A photograph of you?" "No." Grace nodded slowly. "We will leave it unfinished. That would be honest." The words hurt them, but honesty was what they claimed to want. Victoria handed me a sealed letter. "Mother wrote your birth name on it." The envelope said Lucas Sterling. I took it. "I will read it privately." "Of course." I closed the first box. No one tried to touch me. No one called me cruel. They had finally learned that regret did not create entitlement. Serena spoke quietly. "We meet once a month." I said nothing. "We talk about what happened, not Adrian. What we did. That is probably useful. We do not expect you to come." "Good." Amelia looked at me. "Grandfather said you might allow us to attend the Reed Project opening. It is a public event." "As guests." "As members of the public." Victoria accepted the answer for all of them. Before I left, Grace pointed to the old family photograph above the fireplace. Adrian stood between the sisters. The auction staff had removed the frame from the wall. "We are not keeping it," she said. "That is your decision. We are not replacing it with a picture of you." "Good. We do not want to pretend we can correct the past by changing a photograph." For the first time, one of them said exactly the right thing without asking for a reward. I carried my boxes to the car. Victoria followed me to the steps. "Lucas," I turned. She held no letter or ring. "Are you happy?" The question was not dramatic. It was not a demand. I considered it. "I am at peace." Her eyes filled. "That is better." "Yes." "Did we ever give you any good memories?" "A few." "Do they matter?" "They happened. So did everything else." She nodded. "I am sorry we made you prove yourself until nothing you proved was enough." "I know. I hope there is a life where we did better." There had been another life. They had done worse. I had died. Still waiting for them. "I only have this one," I said. Then I got into the car. In the rearview mirror, the 5 sisters gathered on the front steps. For most of my life, that image would have made me turn around. This time, I drove through the gates without slowing down. The Reed Identity Project opened on October 14th, exactly 1 year after the foundation board meeting, exactly 1 year after I stopped begging. The machine shop doors had been restored rather than replaced. My foster mother's name remained painted above them. Reed Precision Works. Below it, a new sign read, Grayline Systems, Reed Identity Project. The opening event included non-profit directors, investigators, hospital administrators, cybersecurity teams, and families dealing with disputed records. No family name dominated the stage. No portrait hung behind me. No one introduced me as an heir. Mara presented the first North Star public interest platform. It allowed approved organizations to preserve document histories, sample chains, access records, and authorization changes without surrendering the data to a powerful sponsor. Daniel explained the legal support network. Then I spoke. I did not tell the audience I had lived twice. I told them the truth that mattered in both lives. Systems fail when trust replaces verification. I said, families fail for the same reason. The room remained quiet. A record can be forged. A signature can be stolen. A photograph can be selected to create a lie. A person with authority can repeat that lie until everyone else calls doubt disloyalty. I looked at the old steel beams above the audience. My foster parents taught me that trust is not the absence of questions. Trust is knowing that questions will not cost you your place at the table. At the back of the room, my 5 sisters stood together. They had registered as ordinary guests, no reserved seats, no family introduction. Victoria listened with her hands folded. Amelia stood beside grandfather's caregiver. Natalie carried no legal briefcase. Serena had brought no camera crew. Grace held the repaired wooden airplane I had allowed her to borrow from the lobby display for 1 minute. They did not approach me after the speech. They had learned. Grandfather did. He walked with a cane and stopped beside the original workbench. Your foster father built this? He asked. Yes. He gave you more than I did. He gave me what he had. Grandfather looked around the building. I wanted Sterling to be your legacy. It is part of my asset portfolio. He laughed softly. That is a very cold description. It is an accurate one. Your mother would have liked this place. I read her letter. He waited. She wrote that she hoped I would grow into someone who chose kindness without surrendering judgment. Did you? I am trying. He looked toward my sisters. Do you consider distance kind? I consider false reconciliation cruel. He nodded. You are right. We stood in silence. Then he asked, what name will appear on the foundation documents? Lucas Reed, not Sterling. The trust records contain Sterling, my life. Contains Reed. He accepted that too. After the guests left, I remained in the workshop. The evening light crossed the concrete floor. On my desk sat 3 objects: the Sterling signet ring, my foster father's old machine key, my mother's letter. For years, I thought I had to choose between the family that lost me and the family that raised me. Adrian believed identity was a throne with only 1 seat. My sisters believed acknowledging me would erase their past, had believed being rejected by them erased me. We were all wrong. I placed the signet ring in a secure archive drawer with the trust documents. It was mine. I did not need to wear it. I hung the machine key beside the workshop door. It opened no modern lock, but it reminded me where I learned to build. I returned my mother's letter to the desk. My phone displayed a message from Grace. Thank you for allowing us to attend. We will not contact you again unless you choose it. I read the sentence, then I archived it. Not deleted, not answered. Archived. That was the correct place for the past. Mara entered carrying 2 glasses of water. The final audit dashboard is clean, she said. No unresolved transfers, none. Access exceptions, none. Good. She handed me a glass. You missed the celebration upstairs. I heard it. Your employees think you should make a speech. I already made one. They want a less serious speech. That sounds inefficient. It is called morale. I will study it. She smiled and returned upstairs. The building was full of voices, people who worked with me because they respected my decisions, people